Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Perlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about our relationship to the land, to the natural world, with my guest, Alexandra Lexton. She is a filmmaker and founder of Lex Productions. She's an apple farmer and a retreat leader. She has been a producer and development director. Her film, Fool's Paradise Lost, has received many awards, including the Illuminature Award from the Illuminate Film Festival, the Best Special Focus Documentary from the LA Film Festival, the Lara Award for Most Inspirational Film from the Borrego Springs Film Festival, and an honorable mention, Lookout Wild Film Festival. She has done many other productions, including The Lure of This Land, Of Wind and Water, This Bright Light, and Digger. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the invite, the conversation, watching the film.
I want people to see this film because even though I already feel connected to nature and I know some of the issues, you presented the relationship of many different people in many different ways to how they relate to the land. And I think everybody needs to see that and be inspired by it, as I was, because your film, Fool's Paradise Lost, with a question mark, has many different characters, many different segments from many different angles. But I think we should talk about the title because that's unusual.
Yeah, during my screenings, people always ask about the title. So Fool's Paradise is a quote from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, where the nurse says to Romeo, "You better not be taking her to a fool's paradise," and alluding to Romeo just taking Juliet for a ride. And then Paradise Lost is from Milton's long poem, Paradise Lost. So obviously, if you put those two together, which sometimes these titles come to me in the morning when I wake up, and I think this one was one of those.
It is unusual because you say Fool's Paradise and then parentheses the word lost with a question mark.
Well, the reason, at one point I was considering this all as a lowercase, kind of like an E.E. Cummings poem. Then I kept getting convoluted. People kept capitalizing this out of the other thing. But lost in parentheses in lowercase with the question mark is obviously, is it lost? We are fools in paradise, and is it lost?
The film Fool's Paradise Lost covers many different areas, many different people who relate to the land and nature in different ways. How do you summarize the film?
It's a love letter to our wild. It's a love letter to our own inner wilds and the outer wilds. The film asks the questions how we can heal ourselves through reconnection to the natural world. I looked for stories of people who had reconnected with nature in different ways and then brought their experiences in some meaningful way back into the world. I was looking for wisdom from people like Jody McDonald. She's the globetrotting photographer, and I got another interview from a science writer, Florence Williams, wisdom from a Navajo scholar, an ecotherapist, the planetwalker, Dr. John Francis, and then other experts in mindfulness and climate change. So the idea is to explore how one person can make a difference amidst this planetary crisis and how reversing the trend requires a knowledge of nature, which is currently cellphone-focused. Our insularity is compounded by this cell phone focus. Where we live is staring at our phones a good many hours a day. Even I can attest to that. Yes, I'm working, but it's also the other things. But the main thing is to be moving towards reconnection to self and nature, and it's proven that it can heal addiction, grief, depression, other human ailments. The other reality is that we need to heal what's left of our planet.
You had some great choices. I look forward to seeing your future films. and all the people that you continue to present who love and care for our Earth.
And each other.
You focused on a variety of individuals in your film and how they relate to nature, from therapy to meditation to their cultural connection to the environment to photographing the beauty of nature. How did you find these individuals, and why those individuals when there are so many people who you could have interviewed and presented?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what happened with The Lure of This Land, which is once I started talking about it and thinking about it, they just kind of came to me in a way. You know, I would be thinking about it or just carrying on in some other part of my life, and Jody McDonald kind of appeared, and I'd think, well, she would be great for the film. Maybe I should check her out. Same thing, Florence Williams. I had stumbled upon her book, The Nature Fix, and had listened to her book on tape called Heartbreak, which is a really wonderful book on tape, and I thought she would be wonderful. And, you know, I reached out to a number of people, David Attenborough, Joanna Macy, before she passed. David Attenborough wrote me a nice letter of rejection in his own handwriting.
I'm sure he's very, very busy.
Joanna Macy just said she just doesn't do that kind of interview anymore. That was, you know, maybe 5 years ago. And others. And some said yes and some said no. So it was just kind of who came through this kind of sphere of exploration.
You are concerned about having people more connected to the natural world. And of course, in the urban environment, so many people feel separated from nature. Consequently, you wanted to present that relationship in many different ways. Could you describe the 7 different kinds of segments and people that you interviewed and showed, what locations they were?
Well, that would take more than a half an hour.
We'll do our best in the half hour.
Yeah, so there are 7 main characters, but about 10 people that are in the film that talk about their relationship to nature. And really what I wanted to get at was stories of people who have rediscovered themselves through reconnecting to nature. Bottom line is we are all nature. We're all one thing. And yes, there's this conversation about othering and dominance and that sort of thing, but the reality is that we are all nature. And in conversation, for example, with Lila June, she's a Dene spokesperson and Navajo leader, and she talks about that in the Dene language. There's no word for nature because we're one thing, and that in fact we have forgotten that. That's kind of the overarching theme. The logline is it's a love letter to our wild, but the overarching theme is that through reconnecting to nature, we reconnect to self, and we have more of an innate, a reconnection to our innate understanding that we are truly one thing in our interconnectedness to nature. For example, John Francis, the planetwalker, he's an amazing story, and he bookends the film, and I was just sort of conceptualizing this film. In my own life experience, I was finding that I couldn't really get to equilibrium during what I call the blue period of my life unless I was outside in nature and on hikes with my dog, and I would just get like this kind of like build up and need to get out there. And when I was there, I was able to just process through and re-equilibrate, and I thought, okay, there's something to this. And then I went to Spirit Rock, which is a mindfulness meditation center in Northern California, in Marin, and I was going to see Jack Kornfield speak, and instead of Jack, there was John Francis, and I thought, aha, this is the guy. He's the guy who's going to start this film. So he's a person who, in the 70s, was living in Northern California. There was a huge oil spill that happened in the bay, and he, along with hundreds of others, went to clean it up, and it was just horrifying. The birds were coated in oil. The beaches were slathered in oil. There was just death and oil everywhere.
The Santa Barbara oil spill in '69 is really what started the environmental movement when I coordinated the first Earth Day in Southern California in 1970. We were concerned about the pollution.
Yes, yeah. And so this is what motivated John. You and he, I think, were both on the vanguard of this movement. In fact, in the movie, he says he told his parents he was going to walk for the environment, and I'll tell you the rest of his story, a little bit of the rest of his story in a minute. And his parents said, what's that?
And we are still walking for the environment, rallying for the environment, protesting to preserve the environment. Battles continue to go on.
They do. do? Well, he took some steps, literally and figuratively. He decided he wasn't going to ride in motorized vehicles, just try it for a while, for a day, another day. But it ended up resulting in so many conflicts and arguments with friends and disagreements. What difference can you make? One guy walking. And then he decided it's kind of too much. On his 27th birthday, he stopped talking for a day, and then another day, and another day. Well, this went on for 17 years.
There was an interesting documentary that I saw about him and met him, and he is talking now because there are different ways, as you have shown in the film, to relate to the environment, to try and get people to be concerned about nature. You yourself are a retreat leader. You believe in meditation as an approach. I personally, as an athlete, want to walk, hike, move through nature and feel nature in a different way while I'm moving.
Yeah. I mean, however you access your own inner peace, that is essential. And whether it's through meditation or through hiking or whatever it is that allows you to access your own inner peace and allows you to kind of come to a place that will self-soothe and reverberate out into the world in some meaningful way, that's kind of where we have to all start. And when we get into nature, all of our senses are attuned, right? So you're listening more attentively, you're sensing your surroundings more attentively, and it goes back to when we had to preserve ourselves in nature, because that's how we stayed alive. But obviously it's a little less dire now, but we still access this kind of like awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of our senses in nature in a more attuned way when we're outdoors, or when we're even just looking out the window at something green. This has a scientific effect on how we feel, and our chemistry changes and shifts. And the more attuned to that we become, the more readily available it is, and really the more high functioning we become, because we're more balanced, or more in balance.
Those of us who are based in the city, unfortunately, we need the car in Los Angeles to get around. I tried to take the bus and the metro, but it's not always possible. Try to walk, can bicycle. We need to have the native plants in our yards, not artificial lawns, not plants that are exotic, but plants that will bring in the native species, the butterflies and birds. But I like to get out into nature, into the wilderness, into the ecosystems that are natural. You are an apple farmer. You have a different connection growing food. Not all of us can be ranchers or farmers. How does that affect your concept of nature by growing food and making it available to the public?
Well, it keeps me attuned to the land, obviously, so that's, personally has a benefit to me. Of course, it's also a stressor because I look out the window and there's always something that needs doing, something that needs pruning, harvesting, tending. But I found, and the story is in the film as well, that through tending the land, I noticed that it was tending me, and that I was finding a kind of solace and peace in just learning about the seasons and the way that we move through the seasons. And for me, when fall comes and winter comes, I sometimes feel a kind of darkness encroaching, not a depression, but more this, I call it just kind of, I just get a little blue. And as I've learned to tend the land here, in so much as I even know anything, honestly, there's so much to know.
And you're in Northern California.
Yeah, in Sebastopol, yeah. But as I learned to tend the land here, I became more attuned to the seasons, a more deeper understanding of the need to go dormant, to regenerate, and allowing that to become a part of how I am on a seasonal basis.
But I'm sure you've seen the impact of climate change, or how we have affected the weather, the climate, because the seasons aren't what they used to be, and we are finding rains or droughts when they shouldn't be, and that affects growing food, that affects the plants and the animals. Has it been extremely difficult to accommodate to the changing climate with growing apples?
I'm definitely not a climate denier, a climate change denier, but I do know that throughout my life, having lived on and off in California, there are extremes, and we have to wrestle with them. Science behind those extremes is, many people believe it to be proven that we are affecting the way the seasons function on our planet, and more extreme circumstances have arisen for a lot of people who are living on the land. But I can only speak to, as far as answering your question goes, to the last 6 years. There were 3 years of drought. Now there's 3 years of abundant rain. There are years where there are so few apples and years where they're just like breaking the branches on the trees. I, as a non-scientist, but as a storyteller, can only attune to my own realities and then the information that I've gathered. But some of the information is really reactive and some of it is science-based. I just try to maintain some kind of equilibrium here, like what do I do on my organic dry farmed orchard when suddenly there's no water for 9 months? Do I bring in water and then the roots will grow closer to the surface in order to access that water if I'm not able to bring in enough for it to drip down to the deep, deep, deep roots? And then those roots are vulnerable if I don't continue to water. So there's all these different ways of looking at things that I'm trying to encompass as a person who's living on the land and tending it. So I do notice extremes, and then I think, how do I adapt? And how do I find community to help me understand how to adapt? People who've been here longer that have a deeper understanding. But a lot of the people who've been here longer are still using conventional farming as part of what they're doing, and they really believe in it. That blows my mind, because part of why we are where we are is because people aren't making the sorts of choices that are really essential, like not tilling their soil so they can maintain these little ecosystems that exist at the top of the earth and in the first 5 inches, especially during a drought. The Dust Bowl is something that happened as a result of people tearing up the land. And also not using glyphosate, which is poison, which is Roundup. That is for people who have to distribute that or paid to distribute that. These gardeners and are using conventional farming, they end up with cancer. So it's like, how do we educate ourselves? That's what I'm saying. As a person who has to tend the land, we have to learn about what it is that's going to sustain our property, ourselves, our property, our community, and then beyond. And it starts with educating yourself.
I'm pleased that you are promoting organic farming, regenerative farming, and trying to eliminate the toxic use of pesticides and herbicides. As we mentioned at the beginning of the program, you have a lot of segments in your film, Fool's Paradise, Lost, and we are going to talk about other people and other ways that one can relate to nature when we return in a moment with my guest, Alexandra Lexton.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Alexandra Lexton. She's a filmmaker, founder of Lex Productions, apple farmer, retreat leader, and has created the beautiful documentary, Fool's Paradise Lost. It's really what you call a love letter to our wild. And you presented how people see our wild, see our nature from different perspectives, different cultures. We mentioned a few people earlier. What are some of the other segments and what are some of the other locations?
I would say probably the most far-reaching location that I traversed a few times in 1 year was Tanzania. I went there to follow Jody McDonald. She is an adventure photographer, and nature photographer, fairly well known. Beautiful photographs that have been in all kinds of publications. And she did kind of a workshop in Tanzania, and when I found her, I was planning to go and interview her, and then she told me she was going to Africa. I thought, okay, well, there's a great opportunity to see her really in action and also to go to Africa with my camera.
Seeing the wildlife in Africa is the most incredible experience of one's life. I hope everybody gets to do it.
It was truly eye-opening. I felt like I had stumbled into the Garden of Eden. I mean, it's abundant with tourists as well, let's be honest, but they are able to sustain the Serengeti as a result of this tourism and the money that comes from that. And, the animals are it's phenomenal, breathtaking.
Tourism helps save the animals by bringing in dollars to help the community. So everybody is saved. People, the animals, the ecosystems.
Yeah. And I hope to get to a point where they limit the number of vehicles that can go at one time in any one area. And I'm not quite sure what the rules are around that. I went in 2021 in January, and it was amazing how few people were there. And then I went again in the summer that same year, and then I went beginning of the following year. And part of what I was doing was researching and following the Hadzabe people. They are considered the last hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. At one point I heard somebody say in Africa, but I think it's Tanzania. They, of course, have really had to compromise their way of being because the land has been encroached upon by other tribes who are more like farmers or the raising cattle, and so the areas that they can go to do what they have done for hundreds of years have been encroached upon. But they have this wonderful philosophy that everything you have is meant to be shared, and that if you have something to eat, it is shared, and that when people commune together and eat together, they are able to sustain the community. I loved that message, and that's part of the story in the film.
Indeed, we are really one earth, one people. We depend, even here in the United States, on resources from around the world. We should care about how we obtain those resources. It's all connected, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. The sorrow, that's happening in our country in particular at this moment, and really does happen the world over, is this sort of othering us and them, right? Nature
Yes.
as something other than us, someone who thinks differently than you as wrong. And when the reality is we all ultimately want the same things: community, love, health, and are for our children to thrive. So that is another conversation I hope is generated from knowing that we can all reconnect in this kind of symbiotic way to tending what is left of this beautiful earth, and that if we're all united in that, it's really one goal.
Who are the other inspirational people that you presented?
Besides John and Jody, there's Florence Williams. She's a science writer and a forest bather. Forest bathing is similar to earthing, where you go into the woods and what happens chemically is you are absorbing the negative ions of the earth, and same with earthing, which is where you feet or your hands or your body on the earth or in the ocean or river, or touching plants. And she's a really wonderful spokesperson for the environment. Mark Coleman is a nature meditation teacher and one of the main people at Spirit Rock. And Mark Coleman is a nature meditation teacher and author. He has a wonderful segment in the film where he leads a meditation in various sites, and he also even came to my farm and did a meditation here and talked about our interconnectedness to nature. Then there's Lauren Kahn, and she's a nature therapist. We did a walk and talk therapy session in the Wissahickon in Philadelphia. She's also a wonderful spokesperson for how we reconnect to self through being in nature. We reconnect to our own nature by being in nature, she says. That's one of her quotes. And that we don't have an attention deficit disorder, we have a nature deficit disorder.
Absolutely. We definitely need to stay connected to nature, and nature will help us physically, mentally, spiritually, in every way whatsoever. I think there's a part 2 coming, another film with those that did agree but you didn't have time to include, or those that you've learned about that you want to include, and who would be some of those people?
I definitely go back to David Attenborough. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I moved off that topic. Granted, if someone came to me and said, let's do another film, let's really take these luminaries. But I also wanted kind of like the every woman, the every man. I didn't just want these people who are already being heard. I wanted people like me who've bought a farm and had to take care of it and learned it was taking care of us and me instead of me taking care of it, or both. It was symbiotic.
I have done thousands of interviews and radio and television programs. Sometimes the people who aren't famous but who've taken on a particular animal or a particular location and tried to save it have been so important to present their story, as well as the famous people that we know about, like Jane Goodall, and of course the recent passing of Verity Galdikas, who studied the orangutans. These people, both the famous and the not so famous, but they are connected to the environment and trying to preserve and protect it. Both the plant and animal life and the land itself have been connected to the land. You obviously care about nature. So what did you learn from these various people that you presented in your program?
In some ways, I think what really became clear to me through connecting to those people and understanding that for all of us, we have learned to care for what we love, which is part of why this story is a love letter to our wild. It's like look and see, look more closely and see, and learn to love and care for this environment that we can sustain, that sustains us. But what I learned, in answer to your question, is that it starts over here. If you can't access this peace over here, and one of the ways to access is by getting into nature, then we're doomed. It starts from the individual level. This is part of why meditation is incorporated, well, not just in my life on a day-to-day basis, but in the story of the film, is because that is where we can start finding the peace.
Your film, Fool's Paradise Lost, is just a wonderful presentation of how people in many different ways can connect to nature and how nature can help heal us, help save us, and how we need to save nature. How do people get a copy of it? How do people watch it?
You can go to my website, which is lexproductions.net.
That's spelled LEXPRODUCTIONS.NET.
That's right, yeah. Or on Instagram at LexProd, LEXPROD. And you will find access to my link tree and various other resources. I have a post-screening questionnaire and meditations that I've recorded that you can listen to if you want to do a screening and you want me to come and do a conversation before or after the screening. You can contact me directly for that. It's also distributed on Gaia, the Gaia Network, which is about elevating consciousness. It's a wonderful streaming platform, and it's being distributed by Bullfrog Films. Bullfrog is just like it sounds.
Having watched it, been moved by it, I totally understand why it receives so many awards from various film festivals. But I'm curious how you decided on this film, this concept, because you've done other films. What's the lure of the land about? What's Of Wind and Water? This Bright Light, Digger. Are they all related to nature, have an environmental theme?
Well, Digger was the first film that I co-produced when I was living in Los Angeles. We made it in the 90s, so you can't even get a copy of that. It doesn't really have an environmental theme, and I was a little more on the periphery of the creation of that film, though I did do a rewrite on it that got Olympia Dukakis attached. I would say The Lure of This Land, that title could have been interchangeable with Fool's Paradise Lost, because that film, I was traveling a lot to Belize, and I was doing my teaching practicum to get my master's in creative writing. I decided to do it down there, and I kept meeting these really fascinating people, and I began to have this kind of internal conversation, similarly to how Fool's Paradise Lost kind of came into my mind and spirit. I was thinking this would be such a wonderful film. These people are fascinating. Why do people leave everything they know and love? What are they looking for, and what do they find? So all these people came to Belize, all not just white retirees, but a whole realm of people that I found worth exploring. So I did. My cousin said she'd do the cinematography. The two of us went down. 10 days later, we were done filming, and it took me 5 years to make that film, though.
It takes a long time to make films. In fact, you spent many years with Fool's Paradise Lost.
Yeah. But also there was COVID. I was a little better at knowing how to kind of weave the tapestry once I got to Fool's Paradise Lost. Thank God for my amazing and brilliant editor, Linda Peckham.
It takes a team. We always need to thank everybody involved with these productions.
Absolutely. And This Bright Light, I was hired by a local executive producer to make a film, and that's on my website if people are curious about it. That is just now getting submitted to film festivals.
And it's about?
It's a story of a young woman who had this kind of brilliant beginning, was on her way to the Olympics, and she ended up with a variety of medical mishaps, and little by little she deteriorated through a series of choices, personal choices, and just like misdiagnoses. But her mom's perseverance, Cindy Reynolds, who's the executive producer, just I think perpetuated her life for as long as she was able to live, which was till she was 42. But the beautiful kind of overarching theme of this story, which I found really fascinating and fun to weave the tale of, is the ongoing communication from from the afterlife and the ongoing conversation around consciousness and whether consciousness continues once we have passed or if it in fact dies with the body.
I am so concerned about our consciousness in our relationship to nature because we definitely need to be supported by nature and support nature, and you have done a wonderful job in your film, Fool's Paradise Lost. Again, I hope people will watch it. They'll be inspired by it, as I have been. I thank you so very much for creating this documentary. Thank you so very much for being my guest.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. And watch the film. Reach out to me, people who have an interest in more conversation around the topic. And thank you. Appreciate the good interview, the kind words.
You're welcome. I have been speaking with Alexandra Lexton, who is a filmmaker and founder of Lex Productions, an apple farmer, and retreat leader. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.